Welcome back, everybody. It's BVarsity Live. Zach and Trevor with you at the Californian.
What's up?
So we have some picks to get to later, and I noticed I got to point this out. I have Trevor's picks right here. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
if
9,
I pick 28
10,
to 13?
11. So there were
No one
25
cares.
games. There were 25 games.
No one cares.
The losing team had 13 points in 11 of Trevor's picks. You really don't like the number 13, do you? Maybe you really do like it. And then 5 of those 11 are exactly 20 to 13. You love missed extra points, and you love 20 to 13. I'm done. Okay. What we did this week is a little bit different. I have my section rankings, section top 25 overall on Bakersfield.com, which you can find every Monday night is when it's posted, and then it's in Tuesday's newspaper for you to check out. And that's all divisions, all 6 central section divisions lumped into a top 25, which is it's kind of cool to look at. It's not all that useful when you think in terms of playoffs because, for instance, I have Ridgeview ranked ahead of Liberty because Ridgeview beat Liberty, but they're not going to play each other in the playoffs anyway. Ridgeview's Division 2, Liberty's Division 1, so who in the end it doesn't really matter whether Ridgeview or Liberty's ranked higher. What matters is how they're ranked in their division because that could define playoff seeding, and it could more importantly define what happens in the playoffs, right? So what we did was we ranked the top 5 teams, and this was Trevor's criterion, according to how we think they will finish the year, correct?
Yes.
Not how they are right now. So it's not just a straight reproduction of my rankings. It's how we think they will finish the year, meaning who do we think is going to win each division? Who do we think is going to be a runner-up? The semifinal teams. We did top 5. So then I guess you'd say the best quarterfinal loser would be your 5th place team.
Right.
So we're going to start. We didn't do D5 or 6 because, frankly, in those divisions, there's one team that looks head and shoulders above everybody else, and then there's everybody else. And
Yeah, it's Reedley Emmanuel in D5 and Kennedy in D6.
By the way, Emmanuel's a legitimately good team. I have in my top 25 overall. They should roll through D5. Last year, D5 was completely wide open, and Corcoran, the number 8 seed, ended up winning it.
Right.
But Emmanuel
that was a year where Kern Valley
was the 1 seed and got beat by Corcoran.
Had a home game and then had to travel to Singer?
To Corcoran.
To Corcoran, that's right, yeah.
And Corcoran beat him in that quarterfinal and then went on to win the title. But Emmanuel was the runner-up. They are very clearly the best team in D5. Kennedy, we don't know how good they are because they haven't played anybody besides D6 teams, but they beat up all the D6 teams, so that lets you know they're probably going to win Division 6, barring a bunch of injuries or something unforeseen. So we like Kennedy and Emmanuel in those divisions. But in D4 is where it starts to get interesting as far as the depth of teams, and you can actually rank them. So let's bring up Trevor's D4 top 5.
Yep. Obviously, we just had the Titans in. I think that's because of the strength of the defense and so many senior leaders on there and guys like Hugo Martinez and Mario Solario. That is a really good Chavez team, and I think when it's all said and done, that's going to be the team that's going to come out on top, even though, obviously, Liberty Madera Ranchos has, a 23-game win streak going?
21,
right?
I think.
21-game win streak. I really think that streak is going to go to, I think it would up to 30 at that point, and then end with Chavez beating.
That would really be something, especially if Chavez was also undefeated and riding its own 10-game winning streak. You'd have a real clash there in a championship game.
Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun. I think Taft has really shown some might with that new double wing offense that Falgood has brought in from Clovis East. They have 3 guys with at least 300 yards rushing, topped off with Josh Saylor. I think they're flying around the ball and playing great. Chowchilla is obviously right up there. And I think that Wasco is the team that as the season goes on, we're going to see the Tigers play better and better.
I happen to think that Wasco is a team that is in Division 3. So, aren't they?
I thought I had them in D4.
They were in D3 last year unless they moved down.
I don't know. From what I got out of the Central Section, they were
okay. Maybe they've moved down then.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, Wasco could be a contender in D4. But this is what I went with in my D4. Same top 2: Chavez, Liberty Madera. I have Liberty Madera ranked higher right now because of that 21-game winning streak. I'm kind of a believer in that. Hey, if you until you get beat, you deserve the higher ranking. But I think ultimately, right now, Cesar Chavez is a better team. We'll see if that proves to be true, but right now I like Cesar Chavez. Chowchilla's had a very strong season so far. Their only loss, in fact, is to Emmanuel, the team we talk about as the top team in D5. CVC, a very strong season. I don't think you had them outside of your top 5. They've looked really good. In fact, their only loss is to Chowchilla. And then I have Taft at 5. Not quite sure about the Wildcats. They're 4-0. I expect them to be 5-0 this week, We'll see
Are
really
you worried
what
about their defense?
We'll see what they're made of when they face Cesar Chavez next week, though, I think. They haven't faced a team nearly that good in my book, so I have them down at number 5, sort of until further notice. Okay, moving on to D3, and we'll check on that Wasco for you because that could certainly be.
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay. Go ahead with your top 5 in D3, Trevor.
Yeah, they're in D4 according to the Central Section.
Okay, so maybe they did successfully appeal to move down.
Hanford, I think Hanford's a team that can compete in any division right now. The Bullpups are playing about as well as anybody other than maybe Liberty and Clovis and Ridgeview right now. Madera's right there. I thought that they were going to lose a lot more out of that senior class from last year. They've been playing really well, and I think they're going to continue playing well. San Joaquin Memorial obviously showed their might last week against Garces, but Garces also showed a little bit of something with Isaiah Martin, but obviously Garces is dealing with some things, moving all those JV players up after canceling the JV season for the year. Tehachapi, still kind of a team I think that they showed what?
Is Tehachapi not in Division 2? Are all these teams moving without me knowing about it?
No, Tehachapi's in D3. I'm looking at the Central
Okay, so they've
Section
all appealed to move down. I just assumed they were all the same
and
as
then
last year.
I have South, which, I mean, obviously the only loss is to Chavez, number 5 there in D3.
Okay, so my D3 does not include Tehachapi. I might have put them in there if I had known they were in D. See, on Cal Preps, they're listed at D2.
I'm looking at Central Section.
Yeah, the Central Section obviously is your source on this. Those teams have clearly appealed to move down. But I do think Hanford is a top 5 team in the section overall. I think they're clearly the favorite in D3. I have Madera number 2. Madera has been a little bit up and down, really kind of messed around with Hoover last Thursday before coming back to put him away. Memorial, again, the strength of being undefeated. Kingsburg's played a very difficult schedule. Have them at number 4. And South High at number 5 right now. And again, I would consider putting Tehachapi there now that I know Tehachapi's in Division 3.
Fair enough.
D2?
Yeah, D2. What I love about D2 is that it's only 11 teams in the Central Section this year in D2, and 8 of them are really, really good teams. So when you look at it, Sanger is a great team at number 5. I even kind of threw around Sunnyside in that spot right there. And then Lemoore, obviously, is a solid team. They've played a great schedule. Tulare is still undefeated. Dinuba, I think, is a great team. Dinuba's only loss was to Hanford, so that's not a bad loss. And then Ridgeview, I still think, D2 returning champs, still number 1 there.
Yeah, well, look, in Division 2, nobody has the quality of wins that a Ridgeview does when you look at Frontier and Liberty. And I know Liberty didn't have Jordan Love, but that's still a really, really good victory. And they looked very good against Bakersfield Christian. They play 2 more Division 1 teams in Stockdale and Bakersfield the next 2 weeks. That's why I have them at number 1 in my D2 section rankings. I followed up with Tulare Union. I really like Tulare Union right now. Dinuba, very good team, obviously made the final last year. I think maybe they've taken a small step back. They weren't even competitive with Hanford in that game a couple of weeks ago. I think they'll be there in the end, though. And then I have Lemoore 4th. They did beat Sanger head-to-head by a couple of points. And the one other team, like you said, Trevor, I considered putting in this top 5 would have been Sunnyside. I have them probably 6th. Then I think there's a little bit of a gap after that before you get to
West.
Some of the other teams in D2, a Garces, a West, and a few of the other D2 teams around the section. Okay, in D1, this is where it gets really interesting.
You and I differ on this. I have Bakersfield. You and I both have Bakersfield number 5. The Drillers are still a team, and this is so weird to say number 5 in D1, but they're still a team that's still kind of figuring themselves out. Bullard, I think we saw some weakness out of them last year, and the reason I have Liberty behind Clovis West is because Clovis West played really well in that second half against Centennial, and I need to see one more game out of Liberty. If you ask me this question on Saturday, and they've beaten Cathedral Catholic, I may even put Liberty up at number 1.
I have a bone to pick with that because your criterion was how do we think they're going to finish?
I don't know how they're going to finish.
Well, that's the whole point. That's why it's
game.
fun. You're supposed to predict.
I know, but that's what I'm predicting.
Okay.
I'm predicting that I don't know with them.
Real strong take.
Thank you.
Real strong take. Okay, my top 5. I got Clovis. Wait a minute. That's not what I sent you.
That's not?
No, I had Liberty number 1.
My bad. I started
Trevor
right
put
mine
these
than
in.
yours.
Yeah, good,
all right,
good
you
job,
have Liberty
good
number
job.
1.
I have Liberty number 1. Okay. I just look. The Patriots looked horrible the first 2 weeks. Okay, they looked all out of sorts. They were snapping the ball over the quarterback's head. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't even throw the ball once Jordan Love went out. They were all sorts of problems. But listen, Mission Viejo might be a top 5 team in the state. Okay,
Ridgeview's a top 25 team.
Ridgeview is a really good team, and if Liberty had Jordan Love, I firmly believe that game comes down to the wire. Ridgeview won by 2 touchdowns. Well, Liberty gave him one on a pick 6. Jordan Love, you got to think he probably doesn't make the same pass. And then maybe he's worth a touchdown by himself. That's a really close game in my book if you have Jordan Love. We saw the real Liberty last week. I'm convinced of that. They took it to Buchanan, unlike anybody else has been able to take it to Buchanan. I've got Liberty number 1. Clovis, look, I like their team. I think they're really good. I think they're going to be there in the end. In my book, they're almost number 1, and again, they're not number 1 in my top 5 as far as this goes. That's a mistake, but they are number 1 in my overall section rankings. But they're almost a placeholder until I see a more consistent effort from them. They struggled to put away Paso Robles in week 0. They struggled with Stockdale last week. Those are good teams, but if you're really the number 1 team in the section, you should be putting those teams away in my book. And we'll see. And maybe it's just a year where there isn't a dominant team in the section and Clovis is going to become the champion because they are the most consistent, steady program. That could very well be the case. I just think right now, if you put the best teams on the field between Clovis and Liberty, Liberty wins the game. I have Bullard 3rd. I would have probably had them at number 2 before last week. They struggled with Central, which caused me some pause. And Clovis West I have at number 4. Just haven't seen enough from them. I've only played 2 games. And Bakersfield, now number 5 could have been Clovis North. It could have been Edison, which beat Bakersfield. It could have been a Stockdale, a Frontier, a Centennial. But I went with Bakersfield almost out of respect for what the Drillers have done in the past, I think as you did. If they're improving, you better look out for them in November because they're going to be tough to beat. But if you think about it, those 5 teams up there, plus a Clovis North, a Centennial, a Stockdale, an Edison, a Frontier, shoot, some of those teams aren't even going to get out of the first round. I mean, we've got there isn't a dominant team in D1, really deep with really good teams, and that's what's going to make it really fun. A couple of those teams that we think are really good, maybe somebody gets upset and I don't even mention Buchanan belongs in that conversation too, obviously. Somebody's going to get left out of even...
I think this is going to be one of the better years for when we get to playoffs in D1. When you look at the track for the SWIL.
I've mentioned like 10 teams that I think are good enough to be possible semifinal teams. If you take those 5, you add in Buchanan, Frontier, Centennial,
and there's
Stockdale.
Only 13 teams.
There's only 8 teams that make even the quarterfinals. So we're going to have some first round matchups that are really good. I mean, the only teams we haven't mentioned, I don't think, are Clovis East and Central. Yep. And like we mentioned, Central played Bullard really tough last week, so they're not an easy out. Clovis East, we don't know. Maybe they're not quite a D1 level team, but they're going to get people fit. So I think you're looking at a really deep D1 playoffs where even the first round should be really good. Yep. So those are our rankings. We're going to do some Week 4 predictions when we come back right after this on BVarsity Live.